Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling something, well, it's actually way more fascinating than it might sound at first. We're going to be talking about corporate communication and identity.
Yeah, the kind of stuff that can really make or break a company's image.
Exactly. And we've got some really thought-provoking writing to unpack here.
Yeah, this isn't just about marketing jargon, believe me.
No, not at all. It gets to the heart of how businesses actually work, how they connect with us as, consumers, and how they thrive or don't in this crazy world of information overload.
Definitely. It's about so much more than just like a catchy slogan or a fancy logo. It's more about really understanding the DNA of a company, like what makes it tick and how that translates into all those experiences that we have as consumers, but also as employees and even just like observers.
Totally. The first source, it really made me think about those everyday interactions we have with companies.
Uh-huh.
Like, just think about it. A customer service call, a social media post, even just the vibe we get when we go on a company's
Well,
website.
absolutely. It all adds up.
It all adds up. And you know what? This source breaks down corporate communication into four main functions. It basically argues that these functions are kind of like the engine of a car. You need all of them working in sync to really move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. The source calls them supporting activities, shaping identity, informing audiences, and fostering a sense of community. And it really is just like with a car engine, if one part isn't firing on all cylinders, the whole system can break down. Think about a time you've been frustrated with a company.
Oh, so many times.
Chances are it was a breakdown in one of these areas.
Oh, for sure. Like that time I waited on hold for an hour, only to be told they couldn't help me. Ooh, I was ready to boycott them right then and there.
Yeah.
Really shows you how important that supporting activities piece is. It's like, get your internal house in order before you try to wow the world, right?
Exactly. And it's not even just about avoiding those negative experiences either. When those functions are all working well, they can actually create a really powerful sense of connection and loyalty. Think about like a brand you love. What is it about their communication that makes you come back for more?
Ooh, that's such a good point. I'm thinking about this one outdoor gear company. I love their stuff.
Uh-huh.
Their whole vibe is adventurous, sustainable, community-oriented, and everything they do, from their product design to their Instagram feed, reinforces that. It makes me feel like I'm a part of something bigger than just a transaction.
You hit the nail on the head. That's a perfect example of how corporate communication can create that sense of shared identity and purpose. And that brings us to another key concept that was highlighted in these sources, corporate culture.
Okay, so corporate culture. We hear that term thrown around a lot. What's the big deal, right? Is it just about having a ping pong table in the break room and being able to wear jeans on Friday?
Right, like casual Friday.
This source, it really challenged my assumptions on that one.
Yeah, it goes way deeper than just perks, although those can be nice too.
For sure.
This source describes corporate culture as like all the unwritten rules, the unspoken values. Basically, it's all the invisible stuff that dictates how a company actually operates.
It's like the difference between like just reading the company's mission statement on their website versus like actually observing how their employees interact with each other and with customers.
Precisely. And this source actually makes a really interesting point about how those unspoken values can truly make or break a company. They use the phrase, the customer is always right, as an example.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I remember growing up, that phrase, it was like the golden rule of customer service.
Right.
But these days, it kind of feels like there's a growing emphasis on finding like a more balanced approach, treating both your customers and your employees with respect. What do you think? Is the customer always right in today's world?
That's a great question, and it's one that has sparked a lot of debate. I mean, on the one hand, you want customers to feel valued, you want them to feel heard. But on the other hand, blindly siding with a customer over an employee, especially if the customer is actually in the wrong, can just create a really toxic work environment. It's about finding that sweet spot, that balance, where everyone feels respected and valued.
Totally. And that probably ties back into this whole corporate culture thing, right? If a company truly values their employees, that's going to come across in the way they handle customer interactions, even like the tricky ones.
Absolutely. This source also made a really important distinction between corporate culture and corporate climate. It's easy to get those two confused, but they're not quite the same thing. Think of it this way. Climate is kind of like the weather. It can change really quickly. But culture, that's more like the seasons, it takes time for it to shift.
Okay, that's a really good analogy. So if corporate climate is like the day-to-day mood in the office, Are people stressed? Are they collaborative? Are they feeling energized? Then corporate culture would be more like the underlying personality of the company itself. Would you say that's accurate?
Exactly. And just like with people, it's important to understand both the mood and the personality. That's essential for effective communication and collaboration.
Makes sense. Now, I'm really curious to dig into this whole concept of corporate identity. This next source we're looking at, it talks about how a company's identity is kind of like a mosaic. It's made up of all these different pieces that fit together to create the bigger picture.
Ooh, that's a great analogy. And those pieces include things like the company's philosophy, their design, their communication style, and even their behavior. It's about how they present themselves to the world and the experience they create for everyone they interact with.
Okay, so we've got this mosaic you're talking about, right? Philosophy, design, communication, behavior, all these elements kind of working together to shape a company's identity. But then there's like this whole other layer of how that identity is actually perceived out there in the world, right?
You're talking about corporate image, and that is a whole other beast. This source really emphasized that image isn't something a company can always control. You can try to project a certain image, but at the end of the day, it's really the audience that decides how they're going to perceive you.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It's like you can wear the coolest outfit, right?
Right.
But if someone just doesn't get your style, it's not going to have the effect you were hoping for.
100%. And just like with our own personal style, corporate image is influenced by a million different things. The quality of your products or services, your customer service, the way you treat your own employees, your online presence, even things you might not think about at first, like media coverage or what people are saying about you on social media.
It's like every little thing you do or don't do, it all contributes to this overall picture that people have in their minds about your company. It can feel kind of daunting when you really think about it.
It can be, for sure. And that's why this source really emphasized the importance of being proactive. Companies can't just cross their fingers and hope for the best when it comes to their image. They need to be way more strategic, more deliberate in shaping how they're being perceived.
Which is where public relations comes in, I guess, right?
Exactly.
Crafting that narrative, making sure you're putting your best foot forward. But then there's this whole other side of things too, crisis communication, because let's be real, even those companies out there with the absolute best intentions, they mess up sometimes.
Absolutely. And how a company handles those crisis situations, well, it can make or break their reputation. Transparency and authenticity are so key in those moments. People are generally more forgiving of those companies that own up to their mistakes and then actually take the steps to rectify them.
Yeah, it's like you can't just put out some generic apology anymore and expect everyone to just forget about it and move on.
Right.
People can sniff out insincerity a mile away. They want to see real action, real change.
That's right. You're spot on. And that actually brings us to another super important distinction highlighted in this source, the difference between image and reputation.
Okay, so we've got image, which is that surface level, how a company looks and feels. And then we've got reputation, which is obviously a lot deeper. So what's the difference? How do we tell those two apart?
Think of it this way. Your image is like your outfit. It's what you're presenting to the world at any given moment. But your reputation, that's more like your character. It's something that's built over time through your actions and your interactions. It's about trust, reliability, consistency.
So a company can have like a really great image, right? Like a cool logo, a catchy tagline, a really beautifully designed website. But if their actions don't back any of that up, the reputation is going to take a nosedive.
Exactly. And especially in today's world where people have so many choices as consumers, reputation is everything. This source actually argues that when companies are offering like very similar products or services at similar price points, it's going to be the company with that stronger reputation that wins out in the end.
Makes total sense.
People want to do business with companies they actually trust.
Right. Like I'm way more likely to recommend a restaurant to one of my friends if I know I've consistently had great experiences there. Not just because it looks nice from the outside.
Exactly. And building that trust, well, it takes time and effort. It's about being really consistent in your actions, being transparent in your communication, and just genuinely caring about your stakeholders, whether it's your customers, your employees, or even like the wider community.
So it's not like a quick fix. It's ongoing commitment, and you have to walk the walk, right? Not just talk the talk.
Precisely. This source really drives home the point that having a strong reputation is a tremendously valuable asset for any company. It can lead to increased customer loyalty, stronger brand equity, even like a higher stock price.
I can definitely see why. If I'm thinking about investing in a company, I'm going to do my research right.
Yeah.
I don't want to just know that they're profitable, but that they're ethical and responsible as well.
Absolutely. Investors are a lot savvier than they used to be. They understand that a company's reputation is directly tied to their long-term success.
And that makes me think about this whole social media landscape. It feels like a company's reputation can be made or broken online literally in a matter of hours.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The speed at which information can travel online is incredible. One viral tweet or one TikTok video, and it can completely make or break a company's image and reputation.
It's like walking a tightrope, but instead of having a balancing pole, all you've got is your smartphone.
That's a really great analogy for today's business world, and it highlights why it's so crucial for companies to be proactive about managing their entire online presence. It's not even enough to just have a presence these days. You have to actually engage with your audience, respond to the feedback, whether it's good or bad, and just be ready to address any issues head on.
Feels like the stakes are higher than ever.
They definitely are. But on the flip side, social media also represents a really amazing opportunity for companies to connect with their audience in a much deeper, more meaningful way. They can really build those relationships and foster that sense of community.
Right. It's not all doom and gloom.
Exactly. When used strategically, social media can be an incredibly powerful tool for building a really strong brand and a positive reputation.
Speaking of building a strong brand, I want to circle back to this whole idea of corporate personality for a minute. It's something we touched on earlier, and I've got to say, I'm really intrigued by it.
Me too. It's honestly one of the most fascinating parts of corporate identity, in my opinion. This source argues that just like with people, a company's personality can be a powerful driver of connection and differentiation. Think about it. We're drawn to people who have really engaging personalities, people who can make us laugh or think or feel inspired.
Right.
Well, the same thing goes for companies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm way more likely to remember a brand that has a really distinct personality, even if I don't necessarily buy their product right away. It still sticks with me.
Exactly. A strong corporate personality can really help a company cut through all that noise and connect with their audience in a deeper, more meaningful way. It makes them more memorable, more relatable, and ultimately more successful.
So how does a company actually go about defining and developing their personality? Is it
Yeah.
just something they decide one day, like in a board meeting or something?
Thankfully, it's a little more involved than that. It really requires having a deep understanding of what the company's core values are, who their target audience is, and what the competitive landscape looks like for them.
Okay, so it's really about figuring out first who you are as a company, and then also who you actually want to be. And then you have to figure out how to communicate all of that authentically to the world. It's a process.
Exactly. It's about crafting a story that truly resonates with your audience, a story that's compelling, consistent, and true to your brand.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It definitely can be, but when it's done well, it is incredibly powerful.
It makes me think about that insurance company with the talking gecko. They've really leaned into that quirky, humorous personality.
Yeah, they have, and it's worked brilliantly for them. Their commercials are definitely memorable, their brand is instantly recognizable, and they've actually managed to make buying insurance, which isn't exactly known for being like the most exciting industry, seem fun and approachable.
That's a real testament to the power of a strong corporate personality.
It really is. It can be the difference between blending in with the crowd and standing out, between being completely forgotten and being totally remembered.
You know, it's funny how we're drawn to those brands that have really strong personalities, kind of like we are with people. I'm thinking about that one coffee company. You know, the one they always have like some witty banter written on their cups.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
It just makes me smile every time I grab my morning latte.
It is such a simple thing, but it really works. They've managed to create this sense of like familiarity and even like friendship with
Yeah.
their customers. It's like they're in on some kind of inside joke with you.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
really makes them stand out, you know, like there's so many coffee shops out there.
Oh, I know.
But that one, you just remember them. This whole deep dive has really made me think about the companies I interact with way differently. Like before, I felt like I was just seeing the surface, you know,
Mm.
just the logo, the advertising. But now I really feel like I'm starting to understand all those deeper forces that are at play.
I agree. That's what's so fascinating about this whole topic to me. It really is like peeling back all the layers of an onion, you know?
Mm,
We're revealing these really intricate connections between how a company operates behind the scenes and all of those experiences they create out there in the world.
totally. And we've talked about so much, like the power of having a really great logo,
Mm.
why it's so important to actually walk the walk if you want to build that really solid reputation, why you need to take the time to craft a corporate personality that truly resonates with your audience, but for you, what really ties all of these ideas together.
To me, if I had to pick one big takeaway, it's that all of these elements, they're all interconnected. They all ultimately contribute to how a company is perceived and then, of course, how successful they become. It's not enough to just have a fantastic product or a tagline that's super catchy. You need to be thoughtful and deliberate about every single aspect of your brand, from the way your employees answer the phone to the way you handle a PR crisis.
It's really about creating one really cohesive experience for anyone and everyone who comes into contact with your company.
Exactly. And that takes us right back to your point about that coffee cup. It's those really small, seemingly insignificant details that can actually make the biggest difference.
Yeah, like that coffee cup, it's not just holding your coffee, it's also communicating something much bigger about that brand's personality and their values.
Exactly. And if that message is something that really connects with you, well, then you're that much more likely to become a loyal customer.
It's all connected. This whole conversation has given me a lot to think about, not even just as a consumer, but as someone who works for a company too.
I was just thinking that same thing. It really makes you realize that we're all brand ambassadors in a way. Every interaction we have with someone, every email we send out, every meeting we attend, it all ultimately contributes to how our company is perceived.
It's true. So even if we're not the CEO of the company, even if we're not the head of marketing, we all still have a really important role to play in shaping our company's identity and reputation.
I completely agree. And that is actually a fantastic point for us to end on. I want to leave our listeners today with this question. How can you be a more conscious and effective ambassador for your own company or team? What kind of story are you really telling through your actions and your interactions?
Now, that is something for all of us to really sit with and think about. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, everyone, stay curious.